Hello, and welcome to another episode of the EvokeCast. My name's Larry Goldie, and I'll be your host today. And today's guest is Dr. Sue J. Goldie. Sue is a physician and public health scientist who works to improve the health of vulnerable populations across the globe. She holds an endowed chair at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health and directs both the Center for Health Decision Science, a school-wide research center, as well as the Global Health Education and Learning Incubator, a university-wide interfaculty initiative. Her research has shaped clinical guidelines, informed health policy, and guided priority setting in countries around the world. Her groundbreaking use of decision science in public health has earned her a MacArthur Genius Award, as well as election to the National Academy of Sciences. She has held several leadership positions, the most notable of which was the founding director of the Harvard Global Health Institute. There, she catalyzed cross-sector collaboration, playing a key role in major global initiatives such as the Lancet Commission on Investing in Health. Recognized as one of the most innovative educators at the university, Sue teaches both at the undergraduate and graduate level and has received more than a dozen awards for teaching and mentorship. She has pioneered novel approaches to educational multimedia and the design of informal learning spaces. In 2021, Sue was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Her personal and scientific journey through the diagnosis became the focus of a 2025 New York Times profile by Pulitzer Prize winning journalist John Branch. He followed her for over 2.5 years through extensive interviews and access to her personal video journals. We'll put a link to that article in the show notes. Since her diagnosis, Sue has continued to redefine resilience. She's completed multiple long-distance triathlons, including an Ironman in Lake Placid, New York, and over 10 Ironman 70.3 races over the last several years, completing between 2 and 4 races each year. She now plans to leverage her position as a physician, public health expert, and educator and apply it to the world of Parkinson's disease with a focus on the crucial role of exercise in managing the symptoms and progression of the disease. And in the essence of full disclosure, I should say that Sue is also one of my greatest heroes in life. She is the model for giving to this world far more than she takes. Sue is also my big sister. Sue, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Larry. That was a long introduction. Let's
That
get
was a long
started.
introduction. Wow. No, I think it's important that people kind of just have a little bit of a background and understand a little bit about who you are and why I was so excited to have you on the show. Uh, because, listening to that bio, you come across as this, amazingly accomplished educator, but you are also an incredibly accomplished athlete. And so I wanted to sort of blend those two together today and yeah, chat a little bit about your life as an endurance athlete as well.
Well, thank you. I am psyched to be here.
Yeah. So I thought one place we could start was you and I have spent some time in the mountains together, both here in the North Cascades as well as we climbed Kilimanjaro together. But you weren't really drawn toward mountain endurance sports. So tell me a little bit about how you became introduced to endurance sports and how you found your way to the world of triathlon.
Okay, well, I mean, yes, I don't know if you guys are listening to this podcast or you might be watching it, but Larry is smirking at me right now. And that is because our first endeavor together when we climbed Kilimanjaro was basically because I called him desperate that my pacemaker generator had died. And I thought that I might need a personal rescue off the mountain. So that was the reason for our climbing. And our first backcountry trip, we spent way more hours getting off the mountain with a knee injury. And I remember declaring to you as we were trying to get me down a cliff, like, I am having so much fun. And you kind of yelled at me and said, this is a serious situation. But the main reason I think the mountains is that I just carry too much, Larry. I am not, I always have multiple bags. I'm just not a light traveler. It's been a problem in transitions in triathlon too, which we'll hear about. But how did I get started in endurance sports? To be honest with you, it was a little bit by serendipity. Um, I was 59 years old and I hadn't been feeling well for a couple of years. And I had thought it was from a really serious illness I had several years prior, but I really wasn't sure what was going on. But my son, my older son, Jacob, was training for a full Ironman, Lake Placid. And I was kind of intrigued at the whole training. I was just super intrigued at how slow he would go, how paced it would be, that it was just like I've never really seen training like that. And so I thought it would be a great idea to get him a present of a training camp in Lake Placid. So having no idea what I was doing, I went online, find a training camp, signed him up, and told him that I was going to go with him as a present. But I would stay in a hotel. I wouldn't bother him. Well, dial ahead. Jacob's at the training camp. He's trained all year, and he looks up from his training in the swim, and I'm in a tree trying to be discreet, fascinated watching the open water swim clinic. And, I kind of sheepishly waved. But the bottom line is, I was just so fascinated with all three sports and watching everyone, and everyone seemed to feel like they weren't good at something. And so it just seemed like everyone had a challenge. And then I watched Jake compete with Aaron, and as Aaron would say, we watched. That's my husband, Aaron. We watched for many hours, and I was so swept up in the people story and just sort of watching people struggle and fight their way forward, in so many different ways. So I was just super drawn to it. And then it all changed one day after the fall when Jacob and I were driving for a practice swim, and I was just going to accompany him. And I said, I really would, I'm interested in doing this. I wonder if I could do this. And I said, if I could find a bathing suit right now, I'm going to jump in the water and I'm going to try to swim. It's been like 30 years since I swam. And it was 4:45 in the suburbs of like Boston. So nothing's open. But he is scammering around. He like Googled on his phone and he's going to find a place. In 2 minutes we find a store. We're like tapping on the window. We buy a man's triathlon outfit, which is going to be my swimsuit. We go to the lake. I jump in. I swim like 150 yards. He is yelling, "You're doing it! You're doing it!" I get out, I'm freezing, I vomit on the side, and I was so proud of myself. I could not believe it. And I literally, I waited for him to finish his swim, and I went home and I went right into the kitchen and I said, Aaron, that's my husband, I am going to do an Ironman. And he said, "You do not swim, bike, or run." I said, "I'm going to do it." And that night at dinner, I pulled up my computer and I said, "Now I'm going to order a bike." He said, "You can't order a bike." And in fact, the last time we had been biking together and I had biked was more than 30 years ago when I was
Oh, God.
dating Aaron. And he swore he would never, after his experience of biking with me, ever get on a bike anywhere near me for the rest of his life. Because even though I didn't really know what I was doing, I was competitive. So it had been 30 years. So he kept saying to me, "You can't order it online. You can't order online." And I kept pushing the button and just ordering a bike. So I ordered a red one. I ordered a blue one.
Yeah.
Anyway, long story short, of course, I had to return them. I had to get fit for a bike properly. But to be honest with you, from that week, I never stopped training.
Okay. And so here is this 2019.
Yes, that's 2019.
Okay. And you had zero background in swimming, run. Well, you were a lifeguard,
Yeah,
right?
but I was a lifeguard where you didn't really have to do anything. You just had to smile at everyone. I
Okay.
barely passed the test. So no, I hadn't really ever really
Okay.
swam, ran,
So
or
did you have
biked.
any sort of background in athletics? You were,
I did. My sport of choice was Taekwondo. I was a martial artist and trained really seriously throughout high school, college, medical school, competed, taught. But even in Taekwondo, we did a little bit of running, like a mile,
yeah,
like a mile sprint to stay in shape, but nothing more than that.
yeah. So yeah, not no endurance athletic background, but I would bet Taekwondo instilled a lot of discipline in you that you took into the rest of your training.
That is for sure.
Yeah.
Yes. No question about it.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about what those first couple of years of training looked like. At what point did you decide to get a coach, and how did things progress?
So I mean, I was incredibly uninformed because I didn't know anything about the sport except that I was totally intrigued by it. And I went online and I looked at, for some coaches and actually I stumbled, Jeff doesn't like when I tell this story, but I stumbled on Jeff
Jeff, we should say is your
Capobianco's.
coach.
Yeah,
Okay.
Jeffrey Capobianco, who is my coach and has been my coach since 2019, when in the fall, after Jake finished, I declared my entry into the world of triathlon. And I was looking at his website. He is the owner of Breakthrough Performance Coaching, and he's an elite athlete himself, humble as could be. You would never know by talking to him, but he's completed multiple Ironman. He's qualified for Kona multiple times and has done that race multiple times. And he trains a lot of elite athletes. So I'm not sure why I was drawn to his website, but mostly it was because he had one of those things like in the corner of the web where it pops up with your face and it says, "How can I help you?" I don't know what they're called. And I was like, oh, he seems so interested. I think he's looking at me through some kind of webcam. And I type into the little box, "I'm 59 years old and I have no background and no experience. And I'm interested in being a triathlete and doing a full Ironman." And realizing he's not writing back to me, but that little automatic thing is writing back, like, "Happy to help you."
That spot. Yeah.
I, he seemed quite eager to talk to me, and so we followed up with a phone call, and we agreed to meet at a Starbucks, and we had our first meeting. So I get to the Starbucks, and I come prepared with multiple index cards, and we sit down. Jeff is he's a firefighter and a paramedic, father of three. We hit it off right away, talking a little bit informally. And I said to him, I have no experience at all. I was incredibly honest, told him the Jake story, the tree story, the whole bit. He asked me, what I was doing. I said, I can run 2 miles, I can bike 10 miles. And so far I've only been swimming for 10 minutes at a time. And he said, well, what are those index cards? I said, these are the races that I've signed up for. I've signed up for 5 full Ironman races. And
In the
look,
following year.
he's looking at the cards. And I actually think I did register, but I had them on the cards with all the information. And he said, let's see, he kind of puts them down and kind of gives me the, like, let's back up a little bit. And he talked to me about an A race and talked about starting with, a small race and then building my way up and how we would train. And the only thing I pushed back on is I said, I want to train for the full. And and so we got started. Um, I would say my initial, several months to year of training. That was also, Larry, just to remind you, the year of COVID. So it was a complicated 2 years, given my work, and now everyone knows what I do. That was a complicated time to be teaching multiple courses and running a teaching center because everything went online. So I had a really big load at work. But it also freed up a lot of time for training because schedules were really variable. So train, but and truthfully, it was really about, what I know now is called building my aerobic base. What
Right.
I called then was inching my way, inching my way up. And I explained to Jeff that, mathematically, I am a mathematician. I do mathematical modeling of infectious diseases. I had built a little Excel model, and if I could run around the block and just do one extra block every single day, I said, in 3 years, even without you, I'm at the right distance. So I sort of had this view that if I just kept at it, if I just kept at
Yeah.
it. And truthfully, that really mirrored my first year of training with Jeff. It was, slow, methodical. There was a lot I didn't really understand that I came to understand over time, and we can talk a little bit about that. But I was a complete newbie. I remember
Yeah.
filling out the form, your intake form. I don't know if you have that in your
Dude.
insurance
Yeah.
company. And I distinctly remember I had to write each sport, and it said, "What are your strengths? And what do you hope to improve in? What are your weaknesses?" And I would write like my weaknesses. I don't have any experience. I don't know how to do it. And my strengths were the same for all of them. I have a
Yeah.
really positive attitude. I'm super determined. So
That'll take you far. Yeah, and that whole idea of, every endurance athlete needs to start out by building a huge aerobic base, and you get there by progressively increasing the duration of your workouts. So, yeah, I mean, there's so many parallels to our training principles and the athletes that we work with. Although I don't think we've ever had someone reach out to us who said, "Hey, I've never actually run before, but I just for a 100-mile ultra run. Can you get me ready?" By the way, it's in 3 months.
Well, I knew it was gonna. I did say I knew this would take me at least a year, if not more. And I mean, obviously, since then, I realized it takes years to build up that type of fitness. But I remember Jeff saying to me about 8 months into our training, um, he was kind of ribbing me for how like neurotic I was at following his instructions to a T. So if he told me to run, 6 miles, 6.3 miles, or a certain duration, I did it exactly to that amount. And he said, I just figured you're kind of type A. And I'm like, Jeff, it's not that. It's like I'm gasping for breath. The minute I achieved what I did, I would sit down and I would either call my friend Melissa to pick me up or an Uber.
Right.
That's kind of why my runs are exactly where they should be because it was
Yeah.
really hard. It was really hard to kind of work my way up. And as you know, Larry, I keep a video diary, and so I have hundreds of videos that basically consist of 3 lines. First time ever, 4.4 miles. First time ever, 6.6 miles. And just working my way up. They're incredibly boring, but I treasure them.
That's great. Okay, so w at this point, I just want to throw a new element into the mix. So, in building that aerobic base, we work with our athletes to determine their aerobic threshold so that they can be training below that aerobic threshold. And there's a number of ways to do that. You can measure lactate, you can use heart rate as a proxy, you can use relative perceived exertion. We primarily use heart rate monitors, and I know that adds a whole nother element for you because from an early age, you've had a pacemaker.
Right.
Can you
I've
just
had
talk a little bit about that, how that played a role in your training?
Sure. So I have a pacemaker for my heart is structurally great, the muscle is great, but the electronic system is what's a little bit off. And I have what's called sinus node disease, so that my intrinsic rate without a pacemaker is too slow. And I also have some tachycardia, so intermittently we'll have a rapid heart rate. And to be honest with you, that has really not been an issue except for the initial couple of years of training. But what we had to do is to just have a broad set of metrics that we used to guide where I was in terms of threshold. We actually used heart rate a lot, but
Okay.
we'd use rate of perceived exertion and where I would perceive if my heart rate, if I was in a tachyarrhythmia and my heart rate is, 190 or 200, we know we can't use that for any kind of data about exercise. That's telling us about something very different. And so, and I've also done formal exercise testing so that Jeff and we worked at correlating, different aspects of using rate of perceived exertion and heart rate, even with caveats of the pacemaker and how that correlated with, with what we were seeing in formal exercise testing in a laboratory. And, we also, as I got more fit and we kind of knew my body and knew where I was, in zone one and zone two, and really had a good sense of how to keep me there, when we wanted to do different types of workouts. Then, taking into account, different other measures like my watts and how I was sustaining myself, et cetera, came into, other metrics that are like a dashboard approach where we're
Yeah.
looking at them all together.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so it was in the fall of 2021 where you got the diagnosis that you had Parkinson's. Uh, can you tell us a little bit about kind of how you first how you figured out there was something wrong to begin with, and then how they made the diagnosis, and maybe I'm sure for most of our listeners, a little bit of a background about the disease would be pretty helpful as well.
Sure. So in 2021, in the summer, I was getting ready for my very first triathlon. I did a 70.3 distance race, and then I did training camp in Lake Placid, which was a full Ironman race rehearsal. So that was the first time I was really doing distances of more than 100 miles of biking, etc. And I was very, the determination outweighed everything else. I was so, determined, but I wasn't quite feeling right as I got up to the longer distances. And on the full Ironman, unfortunately, on my very first try, I wound up in an ambulance at about 100 miles on the bike. And just, I was pretty underweight, relatively underweight uh, for what I ideally would be. And we were really worried about the cold. So I didn't shed layers, as quickly as I should. But for whatever reason, I passed out. And and when I was done, I had written in my diary and recorded a video diary of myself. I think something's wrong. Like I just think that something is wrong. I just felt different. And really several weeks later, it was very insidiously, I noticed a left-sided tremor in my hand. Um, and I also noticed that I was occasionally would catch my leg. And I didn't think much of it, but I wasn't feeling myself. And one day we were biking at Fast Bliss, which is our indoor ride studio at our local triathlon shop. And I was outside in the parking lot after the ride and I was crying. And Jeff had seen me leave and he came out and he said, "Are you okay?" And I just totally broke down. And I said, "Jeff, I think I have something wrong with my brain. I think I have a neurologic disease. I'm terrified. I think it's a neurodegenerative disease." I was really, really scared. And that was really the extent of what I was noticing then. And long story short, pretty soon I did get in to see a neurologist. Parkinson's is really interesting because it's a clinical diagnosis. And what that means is that a doctor uses clinical symptoms to make the diagnosis. And there are four cardinal motor symptoms of Parkinson's. It's a movement disorder, although there can be a range of symptoms that have nothing to do with movement. Basically, what happens in Parkinson's disease is deep in our brain, we have clusters of cells that produce dopamine. And dopamine is a really important chemical messenger. What our brain mostly does is talk to cells talk to each other and then talk to your muscles and get them to move, etc. So when you have a chemical messenger and you have a shortage of that chemical messenger, that's a problem. And what happens in Parkinson's is those cells that produce dopamine are the cells that degenerate. And and so you produce less dopamine, and your symptoms, your motor symptoms, are due to that shortage of dopamine. And the four symptoms that you look for are one is a tremor. Generally, it starts on one side of the body and then eventually goes to the other. Second is rigidity. Third is what's called bradykinesia, which is a fancy way of saying slow movement. And fourth is problems with balance and posture. And these cells, this cluster of cells deep in the brain, are responsible for initiating and maintaining smooth movement. So it's not like a stroke where I couldn't move my right arm if I had a stroke in a particular part of my brain. I can move my body, but the smoothness of that movement, how I initiate that movement, and the balance between inhibiting movement and promoting movement is kind of screwed up because of that shortage of dopamine. And so to get the diagnosis, you need to have two of those signs. You need to have bradykinesia has to be present, and then you have to have two others. And so it was a clinical diagnosis. So I walked in, didn't have to wait for any lab tests, and I walked out and knew that that was the diagnosis. I was crushed. I was really crushed.
I can only imagine. And so, uh, obviously, that did not deter you from pursuing your athletic goals, but I'm wondering, did that change the way that you trained, or how did your coach modify your training in order to do this? Like when the first thing I think about when you explain this to me, having issues with balance is, riding over 100 miles on a bike on windy roads with any kind of impairment to your balance sounds incredibly dangerous. So, uh, what sort of adjustments did you need to make to your training?
So, well, first, luckily, the postural part of that four comes much later in the disease. And so I really didn't have any problems with balance per se. I thought I did with that right dragging leg, but that was actually just the slow bradykinesia. It was slowness of movement. One of the really tricky things about Parkinson's is even for me, who's a doctor, I didn't understand like what each symptom was and how it would feel in my body. If someone says you have slowness of movement, what does that mean? Like I couldn't feel it. It doesn't look like I'm slow. So
Yeah.
it took me a while to understand how each of those symptoms was affecting my athletics as well as Jeff. I mean, first and foremost, I have to say, Jeff did not hesitate. I had not finished the fall, and you can only imagine the determination I had on the way back from Placid after not finishing the fall. I had already told Jeff, let's fly to Kazakhstan and do a full there in 2 months. I was so determined. And he looked at me and he said, this changes nothing. We continue to train. And he was, with me, I mean, from the moment that the diagnosis was confirmed, I'm sorry, he just really never wavered in that he was going to be adjacent to me and we were going to march forward together. And so we had a planning meeting in a Panera Bread. He got off shift and I came incredibly excited. He was like, this is a change, incredibly excited. And I had like 50 manuscripts and I've been reading the scientific literature and I was like, Jeff, there's all of this early data that exercise, in particular, intense intervals, but exercise is completely key to Parkinson's, that it helps to control the symptoms. And there's even some early data that these intense intervals at 80%, not what we do sort of for endurance training, but these intermittent, if you do like 40 to 50 minutes 3 times a week, might even have an impact on progression, a little bit neuroprotective. So it didn't matter that these were early studies. All of a sudden I kept saying to him, how lucky am I? How lucky am I that me, who knows nothing about endurance sports, stumbled into this world by virtue of my son, and I met you, and I have a coach, and I'm fit. I'm finally fit after a couple of years, and here the key to me controlling the symptoms of this disease outside of medication is exercise. And so we really that first year, really the only changes were about he really wanted me, and this would have happened without Parkinson's, to we focused on how I could be more resilient, gaining weight, I went to physical therapy, I went to a nutritionist, I put on 10 pounds of muscle. I just really holistically tried to get myself really healthy. And it was a big lesson for me. It was like, let me trade off 3% of my crazy determination, 3%, and focus that 3% on sleeping, eating, and being sure I'm taking care of myself. So that was the shift in training. And I entered my next fall, the next year, with Parkinson's disease. I did a 70.3, I did training camp, and I did the fall. And I was 10 pounds heavier. I was much, much stronger. And, the rest is history. It was like an incredible, incredible moment to be able to do that, knowing that I had this disease.
Yeah. And for a lot of people, that would be okay. I did it. I did my race. I've trained all these years, and you know, there's the accomplishment that comes with that. But for you, it feels a little bit more like that was the gateway as opposed to the summit. Uh, and you've continued, if anything, you've only increased your race schedule. You, I was fortunate enough to get to help you with one of those races last year. And then when you sent me your race schedule for this year, you're like, can you make any of these races? I was like, oh my God, there's like half a dozen more races on here. Uh, so after that first year, your determination was unfazed, and but I know the disease continued to progress, and you struggled through some injuries during that time as well. Can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that next period of time?
Yeah, I think when I finished the full, I mean, I was so happy. I remember when I went to sleep that night, Jeff walked me back to my hotel, and Aaron and I went to bed, and I kept waking him up like every half hour. I'm like, I can't believe I did it. I was just, like all night. He was exhausted by the next day. And I'll be honest with you, there was something, my team actually won second place as a team in that event. And we were all posing for this picture, and all of the athletes are there, and they really became my supportive community. I mean, so many of the athletes on the BPC team have become my close friends. Jeff, his family, and all those teammates, and I felt really surrounded by a group that supported me, accepted me. I was no different. I just had another challenge. And Jeff handed me the trophy to hold in the middle of the group. And I remember feeling I I am going to move forward with this little cabinet of teammates and feeling just really supported. Now, when I finished, Aaron and I went to Mallorca, and that when we got back, that whole period of time, I started to notice really pretty substantially increased symptoms. My tremors were much worse. And long story short, worked really closely with my neurologist, but had to really start increasing medication. And that became a really tough challenge for me. The medication in Parkinson's is, I won't use this time to describe some of the challenges, but basically the most important medication you can take is the medication that replaces the dopamine shortage. And it's all the same drug, but there are different ways it gets broken down in the body before it gets to the brain where it needs to be. And some people can have pretty significant nausea. And I'm one of those people. So I really struggled with getting enough medication into me to control my symptoms, but not having too much so that I would throw up. And that was a tough multi-month process where Jeff and I really, instead of only training with nutrition and hydration, we began training with getting my nutrition right, getting my hydration right, and getting my medication right. And so long distance endurance training required me to supplement me. This isn't the case with everyone. Everyone is very unique in Parkinson's, but I really needed to supplement my long-acting medication with short-acting. And it was a lot of trial and error to get that dosing right. And so just like probably rehearse with your athletes, how are you going to fuel yourselves? How often? And you can't do that for the first time on the race. You need to be doing it religiously in your training. We just added medication to that list. So that was one significant way training changed. A second was I really added physical therapy and strength training, agility and balance. Parkinson's, there are four different modalities that you really need to do. You need to do aerobics, you need to do strength training, you need to do flexibility because of the rigidity that sets in, and you need to have agility and balance work. And multitasking, all four of those became folded in to our workouts. And we had to look at the hours, and that was one of a few reasons that Jeff felt we should be thinking about 70.3s. The third thing that changed was the risk that some of the symptoms put me at, which, to be honest with you, I've had no injuries during a race. My injuries come from regular life or when I'm training and I'm not paying attention. A foot drags and I don't pay attention. In a race, I'm acutely paying attention. I often have a mantra, do not fall, lift your leg up. Like I really, so the injuries happen in real life, and I've had several, which became a big challenge for me to continue to train through them and to be able to heal from them, et cetera. And as you know, Larry, in short, in 2023, I had multiple fractures. I fractured my clavicle, had a displaced fracture in my clavicle. Now, I will admit that the next fracture was my fault. I duct taped my clavicle so that I could do a trail run and thought I could start running before I should have, and didn't anticipate that by duct taping my arm to my body while protecting my clavicle, I really had very little protection when I tripped and fell, and then I broke some ribs. So I had a bunch of injuries, but I did pick myself back up that summer and got to training camp. Jeff drove me down the major Keene descent, and I sort of biked. The coaches helped by trailing me, so I did it safely, and I managed to complete two 70.3s, which became my big joke. Augusta, Maine, and Augusta, Georgia equal my Augusta full. So was able to do it. But unfortunately, that following year had an orbital floor fracture. And the following year, as you know, you were with me, I had a really bad last year fracture of my ankle, broke three bones, and wasn't expected to be able to run for a year. So those
Yeah.
were challenges that we had to get through.
Well, yeah, I mean, injuries are one of the biggest challenges for any athlete to both come back from, well, first to avoid, and which is a huge part of why we do so much strength training to make ourselves more durable. But then, the loss of training time and the accompanying fitness that can happen, as well as just, the what it does mentally to you when you can't take part in these activities that you love to do, trying to come back from these injuries. And I just have to say, I was with you when you broke your foot, and correct me on the timing here, but I want to say it was less than a week later, against medical advice, you had your coach come to your house and put a mountain bike pedal on your road bike so that even in a walking boot, you could actually get onto your bike and continue to train. Is that about right?
Well, it's not completely right. So the 2 days before I went to the surgeon, the day after I did this, I rigged up my own little boot and
Okay.
tried to bike. That was definitely against medical advice. I did have the permission of my surgeon after I really explained that, and this is true, and this is also a wonderful attribute of my coach. It was always a trade-off because if you don't move in Parkinson's, you really get worse. So we had to find ways that I could still work out with all of these injuries. And one of the things I love about triathlon, I really do, is that there's always a sport that I can do to stay fit. And so, for example, when I broke my foot, I could not swim. I had a cast on for multiple weeks, but I was able, and my surgeon, it was with his permission under very strict guidance that I was able to rig a walking boot around a cast into a mountain bike cleat on my bike, and be able to, get a cardio workout. I was still able to do strength training. I still did physical therapy. So I did do a lot. And I was able to start training really at month 4, which they never thought was going to be possible. And I was racing a month after that. So I think there is a workaround. I've never really taken time totally off. Have always been able to keep that fitness going. Um, and it's a balance. If I didn't have Parkinson's, no question, I think Jeff would have said, let's just shut this down.
Yep.
But the trade-off is that you really, really get much worse with Parkinson's disease if you don't move. So it was a balance. And I'm sure to some level that's true of all athletes, whether it's a physical and mental health that you have to achieve some realistic balance.
Yeah. And so it sounds to me there's a balance between the exercise and the medications. And I know the medications are challenging, especially when you are exercising. But just from conversations that you and I have had, it sounds like to a degree, many people with this disease really struggle to get the medications just right. And do you feel like that's something you've gotten a handle on now? Have things stabilized, or is it still kind of a work in progress?
No, I think I'm way, way better than when I initially started. I think, I've learned a lot. I am fortunate to have a great neurologist who is so supportive of me and supportive of me doing whatever I want to do. And so willing and encouraging of me to experiment safely. Often she felt I was on too low of a dose. And so I'm fortunate to have had a lot of people around me to help me with that. I think that and I think this is a big lesson for people with Parkinson's disease, is that you do have to know your own body. You have to get to know, how can I tell where my bradykinesia is worse? I have a little trick where I fill a water bottle up a quarter of the way. And when I train, I toss that water bottle back and forth, right to left hand. First of all, if I can't kind of coordinate and do that, I'm under medicated. Just by the slosh in the bottle, if I run with it a few strides with my right hand, switch it to my left and run, if that slosh is significantly different left and right, I know I'm underdosed. So I have ways now to kind of track way early on, how is my body reacting to the dose I'm on. The tricky part about endurance sports and racing is as I supplement, and probably you have this experience too, but once you're out there for several hours, your gut does not work exactly the same way as it does when you're just waking up in the morning and taking a pill. And the way Parkinson's drug works, I always find this kind of funny. Like you take it in your mouth and the brain seems so close by, right? So you kind of, even as a doctor, I'm like, it's not that far, just get to those cells. But it's got to go, into your stomach, survive the stomach acid, get down to your small intestine. Then there's one area that it gets absorbed in the small intestine where also protein's absorbed. So it competes. So you have to be sure not to have any protein. Then it gets absorbed. But as I mentioned earlier, in some people, it can break down before it gets to the brain. So there's very little bit of what you ultimately put in your mouth that finally gets across the blood-brain barrier to those neurons where it can be used. And so I've had to learn how to take extra medicine when I'm not absorbing so that I get enough actually to those nerve cells. But I have to say, after multiple trials, I keep joking that I'm going to go on Shark Tank with all of the inventions I have for how to carry your multiple drugs. I used to put them in little things on my bike and then in my run gear and then like by the swim. But now I carry one thing that's labeled with backups. So I've gone through like 5 or 6 different hacks, and I kind of have it nailed now. I think I'm doing pretty well. Uh, I mean, to be quite blunt, it's tough in the middle of the night when medications wear off and you get up to go to the bathroom. I always say it's like a reminder that I have this disease and that my neurons are dying. But during the day and when I'm optimized, I'm doing pretty well compared to when I started.
Uh, that kind of makes me think a little bit about your medications and transitions. And so in mountain sports we call them transitions as well, where when you're climbing a mountain, you'll stop to put on crampons, or you might stop and put the rope on, or you might put your skins on your skis to go uphill or take them off to go downhill. And each of those breaks we call a transition. And as a mountain guide, you can I have gotten quite good at those, and I'm really proficient, and they can just be a couple minutes. But when I'm guiding, sometimes, I have to factor in 15 or 20 plus minutes for each transition. And so, in a backcountry ski day, if we make 3 or 4 runs, suddenly at 6 or 8 transitions times 20 minutes each one, that does not leave a lot of time to actually ski in there. And so I know transition is a huge part of the triathlon world as well. And I've seen you with your little medication cases. So can you just talk a little bit about how
Transitions.
transitions work and why that's such a unique challenge?
Sure. So everyone knows the transition is usually between after the swim, the general flow of a 70.3, just because that's kind of what I've been racing, is, you're getting ready at 4:30 in the morning, transition opens. I'm always the first one there. Just like, why do you need an hour and a half to get transition ready? But I'm always, right at the gate, to get everything set up. And I always marvel because everyone is laying out their stuff because they're going to take 1 minute to get through transition. I don't think I take like 15 to 20. Like it really, transitions are really tough for me. Now, in full disclosure, my Parkinson's has gotten worse over the few years, but I have always been terrible at transitions. So I remember in my very first race, Brian and Jesse, who are uh, work at Fast Splits, the bike shop I mentioned, were the actual bike mechanics for the triathlon. And so I was very late out of the swim. So there was really no one in transition left. I had it all to myself. And they're looking at me and I hear them yelling, like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? I was combing my hair and putting my scrunchie in. And, I just saw no need to rush. Like, this is my first triathlon. I was trying to enjoy it. And so I had a really long transition. And I remember Jeff looking at my time and he's like, what were you doing? And I'm like, I was relaxing. I was getting ready. I had a great bike. I had a really good time. And then off the bike, I was transitioning into my run outfit and I thought I want to wear the pink socks, not the blue socks. And so I changed my socks. So my first transition was complete ignorance of what I was doing. My entire goal was just to finish, and I finished, and I did great. I think I was under 7 hours, which for me was like wonderful, and I had such a wonderful time. So as transitions got much harder for me, if you look at my, I showed you my race results. I never changed the time. I've just been kind of constant the whole 5 years, but I did get much better, but they got much harder. So I could no longer do my hair. I was sort of a normal athlete where I'm like racing to get ready, but I have a lot of trouble tying my shoes. I have trouble with buttons and zippers. I have trouble even getting on I usually take off my wet shirt and just stick on a dry shirt under over it for transitioning from a swim to a bike because I can get so cold. So it really is tough for me. And by the time I'm done with the bike, um, I'm a little better now with meds, but if meds aren't optimized and I'm starting to struggle then I'm really going to struggle on the run. And so I try to take that little bit of extra time. So it's transitions are probably the hardest part of the race for me.
Mhm. Well,
But can I just say, Larry,
yes.
one of the really important ingredients for your brain, both as you get older and if you have Parkinson's disease, is to do things that are new and to multitask. And transitions are an incredible laboratory for multitasking. And so I look at it as it's all brain health. It's all, this is all just helping my neurons, my little neurons that are sick, try to get them to develop new connections, try to squeeze as much juice as I can out of those puppies. And so I look at it as an accomplishment that my race times have stayed the same over 5 years, despite me going from 59 to going to be 64 next week and having a disease. I'm going on year 5.
Wow. Yeah, very impressive. Which, having spent some time with you, I've seen the volume at which you train. We were with you for a week a couple summers ago, and I mean, I'm a coach, I'm an athlete, I train myself, and I coach a bunch of people. And I watched you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go to the pool and swim for a mile and then go into work for 8 to 10 hours and then come home and hop on your bike for 2 to 3 more hours eating dinner while you're riding your bike. Uh, I have to say, back to the bio that I went through at the beginning, you have multiple huge full-time jobs at Harvard, and yet you maintain this incredible training volume, more than almost any athlete that I coach. And so I'm so curious how you make it all work. What are some of the tricks that you use to fit training into an otherwise incredibly busy lifestyle?
So everyone wrestles with this in their own way. I think for one, I try really hard to at least I have the last couple of years to not um, to sort of not to give myself a little bit of grace that I'm not going to get everything perfect in the rest of my life, and to literally like say to myself, I can do an A+ job at this, but I'm going to do an A or an A minus, and I'm going to make some room to not get home at 8, but to get home at 7 or to get home at 6:45. So I can do that 2 hours on the bike. So one is that you have to make some trade-offs. There's no way to just keep adding. I always tell my mentees, you have one pie. You can cut smaller slices, but you can't make it what it is. And so the trade-off for me has been to try to give up things that actually didn't matter, to let myself do some things less perfectly. Practical things, I put everything I need to work out in my car at the beginning of the week. I have literally like 20 thing I could do 20 workouts and just be in that car. And if I have a lecture canceled, I have no pride. I will get my skirt, I will stick on my running shoes, and I will go run, do my run. I have so many videos to Jeff saying, "Well, I'm in my pearls. I'm throwing off my heels. I'm doing my 8 miles, and then I'm going to go back and give a lecture." So I try to fit things in, to the extent I can around my schedule. I guess the other piece, to be quite honest and vulnerable, um, I'm really scared of this disease. I think that when you feel like you are going to lose your ability to move, and Parkinson's also has potential cognitive effects. So it challenges potentially the way you're going to be thinking. I already have some multitasking impact, and so have had to learn how to work around that. It can cause anxiety and depression. So there's multiple pathways that dopamine affects. So there's a lot of different symptoms to Parkinson's. So it's a really frightening disease in the sense that it's very uncertain how fast you're going to progress. So you have a lot of uncertainty in your life. And I think the way I'm trying to manage that fear and that uncertainty is to try to kind of pursue my training with joy. I get on the bike and I don't look at it as like, oh, I have to do this bike workout. I look at it as like, I get to be on the bike and I get to, I never watched movies in my life, never watched them. But now I'm going to go watch 2 movies downstairs. Or I'm going to talk to Aaron. He's going to come down and bike with me and we're going to talk about something. I do a lot if I'm on the treadmill or on the bike, I do a lot of work. I'll, listen to video drafts of some of my educational media. So I do as much as I can. I try to like layer things and I try to be super, super positive, even if I'm not feeling it inside, super positive and thankful and grateful that I am able to walk and get up and get into the water and swim. And that's kind of what, so the training, it's not what I'm adding, it's the way I'm getting through life right now. It's what's helping me actually navigate my life, and it's making me a better mother and a better wife, and help because it's helping me to manage that fear and uncertainty that can kind of leak out to relationships um, in ways that aren't always productive because we're all human. So I don't know if that touches on it a
Yeah,
little bit,
no,
but
I think in a lot of ways you kind of nailed it. What I think really defines a successful athlete is not someone who just lives for their event, whether it be a race or a mountain climb, but learns to just find joy in the training because the training is hundreds of times longer than the actual event is. It's the
yep,
day in, day out. And so to get to a place where you find joy and you appreciate the training and you're not just looking to what you're training for, I think that is the key to.
absolutely. I mean, I'll often have a really hard day, and people will say, well, they run and they get this runner's high, and I've never had a runner's high, FYI. I don't even, I'm still waiting for it, but nothing has ever happened. But, but when I run, I'm filled with like, okay, I'm doing this. I had a really hard day. My meds aren't right. I'm not feeling well. And then I'm running and like, how did I just do 9 miles? Like, how did that happen? And I just feel like that if that was possible, then I'm going to have a better day tomorrow because it's possible. And I get that from most of my workouts, even the ones that don't go well.
Yeah. I want to shift gears a little bit here and just talk a little bit about the bond and relationship you have with your coach. I've seen that firsthand when I came to one of your races, and I've heard you talk about him. When I first got into coaching, I will never forget, just you told me that the relationship you have with your coach was one of the most important in your entire life. And so can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, so Jeff is my coach since 2019. I kind of consider him a dear friend now as well. Um, I mean, recently you sent me an article, Larry, and I don't know if you want to post that, but it was about, what makes a great coach, and it caused me to do a lot of reflecting as well about Jeff. I think, one of the things I think I want to say is, I mean, Jeff, first of all, he's incredibly competent. He's excellent at what he does. He knows what he's doing. So of course that is just all true. It goes without saying. I think his genuine, desire and enthusiasm and belief in me with no background to reach my goals, and approaching me no differently than he would one of his elite athletes. I think that, is incredibly special. I think we've had to really navigate together, how to tolerate, he's had to tolerate a lot of uncertainty and risk with me, whether it was my pacemaker, my heart stuff, Parkinson's, the safety on the course. I remember having, tearful conversations about, do I pull out of a full after those injuries? And him, almost never saying no to me, saying, Sue, I think you can't, I think you shouldn't do it. And just that trying to navigate, how he is trying to let me have my own agency around my decisions and my goals, and never to say no, and never, because that's so important to me right now. And at the same time, to be a guidepost, to have that bigger picture of my health and well-being, and to live to fight another day in mind. And I think we have navigated that with this mutual respect. I also think, coaches aren't perfect and their athletes aren't perfect. And one thing I like to talk about out loud, because I think it's just so instructive, as someone who mentors a lot of people, is Jeff has his own nuances, and I have mine. And I learned how to tell him what I needed. If he wasn't responding in a way that I just needed him more, I had to learn to say, you know what, Jeff, I know there's nothing exciting going on with me this week. There's no race, and I'm not doing anything different. And I'm just slogging out endurance. But I really need you to somehow say in Training Peaks, "You're so awesome, Sue. You're doing like an amazing job," because I'm just struggling this week. And
Yeah.
and I think sometimes you really, and we found our way to, me being able to say what I need to say. And he's found his way to somehow knowing when he just has to pick up the phone and say, listen, deep breath. Um, and, I think you probably saw in there, in Haines City, um, there's a couple of moments when I think about my relationship with Jeff that have stood out to me. And I'll give you three very quick one-liners that are at three very different time points. When I finished the fall for my very first time after that diagnosis, the year, that painful, painful year of coming to terms with this disease, I was coming down the chute. I paused to put on lipstick and comb my hair because, damn it, if I was out there 17 hours, I was going to look good coming across the finish line. I was just so overjoyed. And I came down the finish line, and he was in the chute. He was in the chute with his arms wide open and just like Goldie, like, yelling. I kept saying, I can't acknowledge him because I think I could get disqualified. I don't think he's supposed to be here. But what it meant to me, like running down that chute and seeing him like waiting there, that was like one little memory I have. Another is just at a particular race that I was really struggling with medication. It was in that year where I didn't have it right. I was vomiting off the bike, and he's running on the side of the race outside the bike, running. Did you take a checklist? Did you take your pills? Goldie, pill, and just going down this checklist. And he's like, breathe, take your time, just right there with me. And I kept thinking of this conversation I used to have with John Branch about the difference between loneliness and alone. We used to have these meta talks. And I said, I don't want company. I want someone to accompany me. I don't need someone to carry me. I don't need someone to push me. I don't need someone to pull me. I need someone to accompany me to, and I feel like that's a great coach. They're by your side, and I wrote to Jeff on a gift I gave him, a quote from Amelia Earhart, which I will screw up, but the essence of it is how I feel. Like your coach helps you like face your fear and find your courage. When I face my fear, I find my own courage, but Jeff always is looking to help me with that piece. And he's just never, ever gives up on me. And he's been by my side. And so he's really, I think that is what a great coach is. Um, and just to be fair to this whole team, to the whole triathlon community, to the guys in the bike shop, all of them, they've all played some role in helping me. And I just feel this sheer gratitude, but also there's like a lesson. I try to talk to other people I've come to know with Parkinson's and who are struggling with something, is you can't get everything from one place. And you need to kind of build moments up. You build moments where you feel strong and build multiple relationships, and each one does a little piece, but together you kind of you find your scaffolding that you need. And Jeff's an important component of that, as well as the people I've come to know through my relationship with him, my team, etc.
Yeah. You've always had a knack for building these incredible teams, no matter what you're doing. Can we talk a little bit about the actual races themselves?
Yeah.
So I came to your race last December in Haines City, Florida.
Yep.
You mostly just wanted me there as a driver and to make sure you ate. But one thing I had never realized, not having been to one of these races, was that they don't allow you to wear earbuds. You can't have a phone with you for communications. Like you are out there on the course, 100% by yourself. And I know for me, when I do a lot of my training, I always have earbuds on. I listen to audiobooks, podcasts, music, and I just find it so helpful to just distract my brain from the suffering, that I sometimes experience during these long workouts. And I had no idea in, something that can be, an 8-hour event. You can't have any of that. You are literally just in your own head the whole time. And
Yep.
so yeah, that was a shock to me. What do you do during the races to just help while your body is kind of living in the pain cave?
So some people will actually train without anything so that the races aren't, and I have no merit in that. I feel like there's no reason to make myself miserable when I'm training like every single day. So
Yeah.
I do wear like one ear pod, and I'm safe about it, but I do all those things when I train. But in races, I've tried a few things, and I can tell you like several of my efforts that haven't worked. So like one is I tried to actually memorize some songs that I really like. Because songs, I always like know one line of them or two lines, and then I can sing it along if I hear it, but when you're totally on your own, you don't remember like you kind of have three or four words. So I tried actually to print out like some songs I liked. And when I was doing swims, my workout swims, I would try to look at them and like memorize the lines. And I could not do it. Like I just couldn't do it. So that didn't work. Then I've tried making like just singing the first line to songs I like. I think for the entire last 2 hours of the full Ironman, like hours 16 and 17, I sang I feel good, da 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 da, over and over and over again, as loud as I could. Everyone around, people came up to me at the end of like, I was out there in the pitch dark, I heard you, and I just the one line over and over. I've also done, there was a race just, a couple of years ago. It was like raining out, and I was doing the run in the rain. I would have like abandoned a bike if it was pouring, but I was running. And I made up a song, and it was ridiculous. I literally was making up a song about, people in my life, and singing it out loud. And then when I'm really in pain, I count. forwards and backwards. I literally count 1, 2, 3, 4 to 10, and then I count backwards. And I do this out loud, loudly. So um, people hear it. And generally, if they're near me, they are in exactly the same position I'm in. Like,
Oh,
we are not sprinting to the front, we are slogging it out, in that between the 7 and 8 hour mark. I'm usually around that 7, 7:10 mark. The other thing I do, Larry, is I'm really open in races. Like I try to talk to everyone. I actually love meeting people. I keep wanting to write an article called What I've Learned from the Back of the Pack. And even though I'm not in the total back of the pack, I am in the back of the pack. And just all we live in such a fractured society. And as someone who's like worked all over the world and, have seen things that are really horrible, um, and also seen like kind of the worst and the best of humanity, this last couple of years has been tough. It's been tough how fractured we are. And I feel like it's the wonderful thing about sports and especially about endurance events is that you're out there and all of that melts away. You see who cares how anyone voted? You talk about the people you love in your life or what challenge you're facing or why you're out there. And you see someone sit down and they're about to quit and you go over and you don't care who they are. You say, "Could I lend you a hand? Are you okay? Lean on me. Here's a salt tab. You can do it." And I just feel like it's this wonderful like laboratory of like what it means to be human. And I used to tell John in our many conversations, there's something about a race that's really different. And the races for me, number one is this feeling of you're doing something alone, but you're with a lot of people that are doing that very same thing. And
yeah.
it's a really incredible way to kind of have a belief in the sheer sort of, joy of human companionship. I think the second is um, I'm really not a good swimmer, Larry. You have been in a boat and have seen me. And when I jump in the water and there are hundreds and hundreds of people in the water, I'm pretty small. Most are bigger than me. I'm not that good, so I'm not very confident. I've got Parkinson's disease and a pacemaker, and I'm 64. So, altogether, I'm kind of scared when I get in the water. And there's something about facing that fear and just facing it and saying and like almost insisting that I am going to override that fear with incredible like joy and determination and belief in myself. And to this day, every single race, when I get to the end where they're helping you out of the water, I am shocked that I am alive and well. I always, like, even if I've gotten really fat, I was in a downriver swim, I will pause and celebrate with anyone that will celebrate with me. I hug the people helping me get out of the water. I hug anyone close by. I cheer for myself. If Jeff is there, I usually will yell, "Am I winning?" And I feel like there's something about it that just feeds my soul. It's like I was so scared, but somehow I faced it and I'm fine and I'm absolutely fine. And I know I always say one foot in front of another. I've been I've been like lately, I've had a couple of really hard swims. One, the race that you were at was like a really hard swim. And I've been saying to myself, like one buoy to another lately. And there's something about swimming, like you can't even see the buoy, but you have to kind of trust that it's going to be there. There's the aspect of you feel like you're going nowhere. Like when I'm swimming, I seriously feel like sometimes I am not moving. But if you just keep doing whatever you were doing, eventually you do get there. Like you do move forward. There's just and if someone's hitting you, like I get bashed around. I've learned to just stay calm. Just stay calm. Don't react. And there's all this metaphor for life. Like, okay, I'm at that buoy. I'm like, I just survived like 9 large men, swimming over me. And I just went limp and like let myself go and then continue on my way. And then I think about that at work when I'm starting to get really anxious and say, let it go. It's one buoy to the next buoy. And so I just feel the race puts me in this situation where it's almost like the craziness of my work in real world environment, but I'm controlling how I respond to that environment in a race. And then I get to the finish line. And I just feel like I take that as like a laboratory, and it just it helps me in my daily life. And probably that would be true without Parkinson's, but in particular, it's really helped me. And again, the races, as I was talking about Jeff, we have to trust each other. I've always told him if I feel unsafe, I just walk off the course. That hasn't happened, but I'm not really there for I'm there to do the race. I don't think of it as, I don't think of places. I don't think of anything but making my cutoffs um and doing it, with my full presence.
Yeah, uh there are a lot of parallels to the world of mountain climbing as well, where, we go and climb these mountains, and in no way, shape, or form are we making the world a better place. It's like this most completely frivolous activity where we're just challenging ourselves, but yet there is something about being in this, really dangerous place, pushing yourself physically beyond sometimes what you think you can do, and then taking those lessons back into your everyday life. And I think that's what draws so many people to climbing is it's not it is partially getting to spend the time in these beautiful places and challenging ourselves, but it's also for the perspective that we maintain when we come back to our everyday lives.
Right, right.
Well, I know you're at a place in your life where you're going to take your unique set of skills and start to apply them into the world of Parkinson's. So I'd love to kind of end by talking a little bit about that. So uh, maybe we can start kind of big picture. What would you say is something that you wish that more people understood about Parkinson's?
Um, I mean, I think it's not only people understanding, it's like, even to be honest with you, uh, even the medical community, Parkinson's is a real misunderstood illness. And and it's one of the challenges I see as something that I want to do something about. It's a tricky disease. We've learned a lot about the disease in the last, 10, 15 years, incredible amount about how complicated it is. It's not just a shortage of dopamine in those cells. There's a lot of things that go wrong. We've learned about some of the causal factors, and there's still a lot to learn. But I think that one of the most important things for people to know, whether they know someone with Parkinson's or they themselves develop Parkinson's, is that it doesn't play out the same in everyone. It really is a collection of diseases in some ways. And so you 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 can't really predict what symptoms you're going to get, how fast they're going to progress, how they're going to affect you. And in some ways, that seems like a negative, but I actually think it's like a positive. That uncertainty has given me like hope. Like it seems like it's not destined for, it's not going to one particular place. And so I think I have to make this choice to feel hopeful about the possibility. And so I guess one thing I really want to do, and I hope that people will be interested, maybe even by hearing this podcast, is to be curious about someone that they hear about that has Parkinson's disease, and a really, any disease, but in particular, we're talking about Parkinson's now, and to realize that any any type of imagery or assumption you have about someone with that disease may not be true, because it does play out differently in so many people. The athletic side is one, but Larry, I grapple with assumptions at work. People know that there can be cognitive effects, and one of the reasons I sort of had three goals as I started to get my bearings. The first couple of years, I was just really trying to survive, and in large part, triathlon and training was helping me, but it was incredibly hard. But by the end of the second year, my wheels were turning, and I was feeling like I am so fortunate. I'm a physician, I'm a public health person, I do health policy. I'm an educator. I'm a communicator. What can I do here? And started to think about, what do I want to do? I can't control what this disease is going to do to me outside of, taking care of myself. But I can feel like I'm having some control if I can do something that's going to make things a little better for someone else. And so my goals were really three to start with. The first was just to give voice. And the reason I spent this 2.5 years with John Branch and let him see everything and let him hear every video I recorded, no, nothing was kept from him, is I wanted him to give voice to others about what you experience relatively silently. Most people see me and they don't think anything is wrong. But what's happening inside is just really hard, and what's under those medicines and what you're having to do to live your life. So that was my first goal. Um, the second is that I want to leverage my intense interest in exercise and what exercise can do for Parkinson's, and to create a series of both educational multimedia that I've done for other parts of public health for both understanding Parkinson's disease, but also to build those educational materials into what I'm going to call is a campaign, a Goldie campaign, which I will put the same effort as I do all of my other endeavors. I will not rest until it gets done, where we can really get that information out, not only to people with the disease, but to people that love them, and to clinicians and to trainers, etc. And the third part is to really work on the policy angle. It's one thing to provide education, but you have to be able to change policy. The truth is, we all need to be exercising. The same benefits and everything I mentioned that's for Parkinson's disease recommended is exactly what's recommended for the general population to prevent cardiovascular disease, etc. And but we have a hard time getting people to do it, don't we?
Yeah.
And we need to apply the same rigorous science that we do to understanding what's happening in a cell, to the mitochondria, as to how do you get people to actually change behavior, to like change their lifestyle. What are nudges? How do we design, our spaces? Like, what are all the ways? Public health always thinks of health sector and the non-health sector. So I want to think broadly with my public health lens about how I can contribute to the large public health question of how we get people moving, which is critically important for public health. And within that, how do we elevate Parkinson's on the global agenda, on the national agenda, and implement policies that will help people living with the disease now? And I want everyone to know that for someone like me, you know, more than half of my neurons, maybe it's 60%, maybe 70, maybe 80 of the neurons that produce dopamine are already pretty, pretty kind of gone. They're not functioning well. So for me, there's probably not going to be a cure. There's not going to be a drug that all of a sudden becomes available in a year and I'm going to go backwards. It's just not realistic. But but exercise, and in particular, the intriguing results of intense aerobic activity 3 times a week, 3 to 4 times a week, at least 40 to 50 minutes, is really compelling and really, really positive. And I want to be sure that information is out and the policies that would support people to do it is out, not only in this country, but also thinking more globally, in the space that I do my other work in.
Awesome. Uh, I I have no doubt, like so many other things that you've put your mind to, that you will be successful in creating this Goldie campaign and changing the face of this disease. Sue, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you're
I
in.
want to be respectful of your listeners' time since they're going to be bored.
Well, let's just wrap up with what kind of racing goals do you have on the horizon? What's next?
Well, I have on Jeff's refrigerator uh, five. So I don't know if you've noticed the pattern, Larry, but 3 years ago I did two races.
Yep.
The next year, I said I need to add another race for every year of my diagnosis. So instead of going down and cutting down, I'm going to go up, the opposite. So I did 3 races the following year. Last year, I did four races. And so this year I am going to do 5 70.3s. I've registered for four, and Jeff and I are in discussion over whether I will give a full shot again.
Oh,
So
wow.
currently we are that is on my dance card, and we will see. But I'm going to do five races, and the question will be what they are. Although I will tell you that if I'm not able to do the full, we decided the fifth race would be a reunion in Haines City.
Okay, I'm in. Count. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to do this, Sue. I'm
Oh,
so
thank you for
grateful.
having me.
Oh, it was great pleasure. Well, and thanks to all you listeners out there for tuning into the EvokeCast, and we will see you next time.